The ledger book on her kitchen table told Elara Hayes she was a widow. The parched earth outside her window told her she was a fool. But the law, in the form of Marshal Elias Thorne, told her she was trespassing on a life she had no right to claim. In the New Mexico territory, the wind doesn't whisper. It steals. It stole her husband. It stole her hope. And now, it had blown something impossible against the wall of her barn. She found the child, just as the sun bled out behind the mesas, a small, shivering figure from the Pueblo, silent as a stone. Elara had a choice: obey the law of men, or the law of a heart she thought had long since turned to dust. By midnight, her choice would bring an answer from the valley, spoken not in words, but in the thunder of drums. The wind was a thief in the Red Rock Valley. It came down from the high mesas with a serrated edge, scouring the land, peeling paint from the scant timber of Elara Hayes's small ranch house, and carrying away the last of the topsoil. It was a constant, malicious presence, a reminder that survival here was not a guarantee, but a daily, brutal negotiation. Elara Hayes stood on her warped porch, one hand gripping a post so hard her knuckles were white, the other holding a thin shawl against the collar of her worn cotton dress. She was a woman carved from the same unforgiving landscape. Her hair, the color of dried flax, was pulled back in a severe bun, and her eyes, a pale gray, held the flat, weary look of someone who had stared into the horizon for too long, expecting nothing good to come from it. Her husband, Arthur, had seen promise in this valley. He had seen the thin ribbon of the creek, the shelter of the canyon walls, and the rich red of the soil, and he had called it home. He'd bought the land cheap from a man named Sullivan, who was eager to leave. Now Elara understood why. Arthur had lasted 2 years, long enough to build the small, sturdy adobe and timber house and a barn that already listed to the west. He'd been taken by a rattler 6 months ago, a quick, ugly death that had left Elara with a 30-acre ranch she couldn't work, a mule she couldn't sell, and a profound, echoing silence. The nearest town was Red Rock Creek, a cluster of adobe buildings, a general store run by a tight-fisted man named Patterson, a saloon, and the marshal's office. The townspeople, settlers like herself, were bound by a shared, unspoken fear. Fear of the land, fear of the Apaches to the south, and a deep-seated, simmering distrust of the Pueblo people who lived on the high mesas a dozen miles north, at the ancient citadel they called San Geronimo. The Pueblo kept to themselves, shadows on the cliffs, but their presence was felt. They were the original inhabitants, and the settlers in their hearts knew they were the intruders. Marshal Elias Thorne was the iron fist that kept the peace. He was a tall man, straight-backed from his years in the cavalry, with a face that looked like it had been left out in the sun too long. He had a particular, venomous hatred for the inhabitants of San Geronimo. He called them heathens and strays, and enforced a strict, unwritten law. No mixing, no trading, no contact. To be caught harboring. One, as he put it, was tantamount to treason against your own kind. This evening, the dust was so thick it turned the air to a choking ochre fog. The sun was a diseased-looking smear in the west. Elara had spent the day mending a section of fence the wind had flattened, her hands cracked and bleeding inside Arthur's old work gloves. She was checking the latch on her chicken coop, the 6 hens inside, already huddled and silent, when she heard it. It wasn't a sound. It was a cessation of sound. The wind, which had been howling like a banshee, momentarily paused, drawing a breath. In that vacuum, Elara felt a prickle on her neck. A 6th sense. She wasn't alone. She froze, scanning the yard. The mule, Samson, was sealed in his stall, The barn door was barred against the storm. Everything was as it should be. She chided herself. Loneliness was making her jumpy. She turned to go back inside, to the cold comfort of her kitchen, when her eyes caught on the lee side of the barn. There was a shape. It was huddled between the water barrel and the adobe wall, small and dark, trying to make itself part of the shadows. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. Her first thought was a coyote, or perhaps a mountain lion driven down by the weather. She reached for the heavy iron skillet she'd left by the wash basin. "Who's there?" Her voice was ripped away by the returning wind, but the shape flinched. It was human. She stepped off the porch, the gritty dust stinging her face. She held the skillet up like a weapon. "I said, who's there? I've got a scattergun inside and I'll use it." The shape didn't move, only pressed itself tighter against the wall. Ilara crept closer, her boots crunching on the gravel. The dim, failing light revealed not a man, but a child. A girl. She looked to be no more than 7 or 8 years old. Her hair was a fall of stark, blue-black hair, matted with dirt and burrs. She wore a simple, knee-length dress of what looked like woven cotton, once white, now the color of the earth. Her feet were bare, the moccasins that had clearly been on them worn through to nothing. She was shivering, a violent, bone-deep tremor that seemed to shake her whole frame. She was from the Pueblo. Ilara stopped. All of Marshal Thorne's warnings, all the town's prejudice, all the fear, created a cold knot in her stomach. This was trouble. This was the kind of trouble that could cost her the ranch. Thorne could claim she was inciting them, claim she was a sympathizer, and find a legal way to run her off Arthur's land. "You can't be here," Ilara said, her voice hard. "You need to go. Go on. Back to the mesa." The girl looked up. Her face was smeared with dirt, but her eyes were huge, black and bottomless, filled with a terror so profound it struck Ilara dumb. The girl wasn't being defiant. She was petrified. She opened her mouth, but only a dry, rasping sound came out. She was clutching something small in her hand, a piece of wood. The wind howled, driving a fresh sheet of sand into them. The girl whimpered, a low, animal sound of pure misery, and huddled lower. "Lord, forgive me," Ilara whispered. The calculations in her head, the risk, the law, Thorne, all evaporated, replaced by the simple, stark image of the shivering child. Arthur had been a good man. He would not have left a dog to die in this storm. "All right," Ilara said, dropping the skillet with a clang. The girl flinched. "All right, I'm not going to hurt you." She knelt, keeping her movements slow. "I'm Ilara. I live here. You're freezing." She reached out a hand. The girl recoiled, pressing her back against the rough adobe. "It's all right," Ilara said again, softer. "The storm is bad. Come inside, just until the wind dies down. Come on." She stood slowly and backed away, opening the kitchen door. The rectangle of yellow lamplight that fell across the yard looked like the only warmth left in the world. She motioned with her head. "Come." For a long, agonizing minute, the girl didn't move. Ilara wondered if she would simply let the storm take her. Then, with a staggering, weak motion, the girl pushed herself off the wall. She stumbled, her legs barely holding her, and moved like a ghost across the yard, disappearing into the light of the kitchen. Ilara grabbed the skillet, shut the door, and threw the heavy bar across it. The wind howled outside, but the sudden, heavy silence in the small kitchen was 10 times louder. The girl stood dripping on the rag rug, shivering so hard her teeth chattered. Her lips were blue. "Sit," Ilara commanded, pointing to the small stool by the hearth. The girl obeyed instantly, collapsing onto it. Ilara grabbed the heavy wool blanket from her own bed. one of the few luxuries she had left, and wrapped it tightly around the child's shoulders. The girl's small hand, still clutching the wooden object, peeked out. Elara gently pried her fingers open. It was a small, intricately carved bird, a sparrow or a hawk, smoothed by much handling. "That's beautiful," Elara murmured. The girl's eyes fluttered, and her head lolled. She was sick. It wasn't just the cold. Elara touched her forehead. It was burning. "Oh, Lord," Elara breathed, staring at the small, feverish stranger she had just barred inside her house. "What have I done?" The small house was divided into 2 rooms, the main kitchen and living area, and Elara's small bedroom. There was no place to hide a secret. Elara looked at the child, who was now drifting in and out of a feverish sleep, still wrapped in the blanket by the weak fire. The girl's breathing was shallow and ragged. Elara acted on instinct, her mind shutting out the larger consequences and focusing on the immediate. She stoked the fire, adding precious pinon logs until the hearth crackled with life. She filled a basin with water from the pump and, with a clean rag, began to gently wash the grime from the girl's face and arms. The child was thin, her ribs visible beneath her skin. But she was clean. The dirt was from her journey, not from neglect. As she worked, she spoke, her voice low and steady, more for her own benefit than the child's. "You've come a long way, haven't you? A very long way. Those moccasins, they're gone, worn right through. You've been running." The girl's eyes flickered open. They were lucid for a moment, intelligent and assessing. She was taking in her surroundings, the sparse kitchen, the neatly stacked pans, the shotgun resting on its pegs above the door. "Water?" the girl whispered. Her voice was a reedy scratch. "Yes, of course." Elara ladled water from the bucket into a tin cup and held it to the girl's lips. The child drank greedily, her small hands coming up to clutch the cup. When she finished, she sank back into the blanket. "What's your name?" Elara asked gently. The girl stared at her, her gaze wary. She said nothing. "My name is Elara Hayes. This was my husband's home. Arthur." Elara gestured to the empty chair across the table. The girl's eyes followed the gesture, then snapped back to Elara. She seemed to understand the past tense. "You're safe here," Elara said, and was surprised to find she meant it. "At least for tonight. Until the storm passes, and this fever breaks." A sudden, sharp bang echoed from the porch, making both of them jump. It was not the wind. It was a fist on the door. "Elara! Elara Hayes! You in there?" Elara's blood ran cold. She knew that voice. Corinne Masters. Her nearest neighbor, if you could call 2 miles near. Corinne was a lonely, bitter woman whose only pleasure was the accumulation of gossip, which she delivered to Marshal Thorne like a tithe. "Don't make a sound," Elara whispered to the girl, her voice fierce. The girl's eyes widened, and she nodded, pulling the blanket up to her chin. Elara strode to the door. "One moment, Corinne. The wind is fierce." She took a breath, composed her face into a mask of weary annoyance, and lifted the bar. The door flew open, slamming against the wall, revealing Corinne Masters bundled in a man's heavy coat, a lantern in her hand. "Good heavens, Elara! Took you long enough? I thought you'd been carried off." Corinne bustled inside, stamping dust from her boots and bringing the chill of the storm with her. "I was in the back," Elara lied, shutting the door against the wind. "What on earth are you doing out in this, Corinne? You'll be blown clear to Texas." "I saw your smoke," Corinne said, her sharp eyes darting around the room. She was a bird-like woman, all quick, jerky movements. "A lot of smoke. Look at that fire. You're burning through your winter wood like it's nothing. I thought something was wrong. Thought maybe you were sick, or had visitors." Her gaze lingered on the stool by the fire, where the blanket was piled. But the girl, with the instinct of a hunted animal, had vanished. Ilara's heart leapt into her throat before she saw it. The girl had slid from the stool and was pressed into the dark, narrow gap between the hearth and the woodbox. She was completely obscured by shadow. "Just the cold, Corin," Ilara said, moving to stand between her neighbor and the hearth. "This adobe holds the chill something terrible." "Humph." Corin wasn't convinced. She unwrapped the scarf from her face. "Well, I came to tell you, Marshal Thorne is on the warpath. He rode out past my place an hour ago, heading this way." Ilara focused on pouring 2 cups of coffee, forcing her hands to remain steady. "The Marshal is always on the warpath. What is it this time?" "He says one of the Pueblo are missing. A girl." Ilara's hand slipped, sloshing hot coffee over the rim. She quickly set the pot down. "Missing? How does he know? He doesn't exactly socialize with them." "He says the men from the Pueblo were seen down in the low valley, which they never do. Searching. He thinks they're looking for something. Or..." Corinne lowered her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. "That one of them ran. He says if they're bold enough to come down from the mesa, they're bold enough to cause trouble. He warned me to bar my doors and report any activity." Her eyes scanned the room again, this time more deliberately. They passed over the shotgun on the wall. They noted the basin of water on the table, still cloudy with dirt. They saw the small, worn-out remnants of the moccasins Ilara had foolishly left near the door. Corinne pointed a long, bony finger. "What are those?" Ilara looked down. Her mind went blank. "Rags," Ilara said, her voice tight. "For the door. The dust gets in under the—" "Those ain't rags, Ilara, or those are moccasins. Or they were. Child-sized." Corinne's eyes lit up with a dreadful, righteous fire. "You have her, don't you? You have the girl, here." "Corinne, lower your voice," Ilara hissed, grabbing her arm. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know what Marshal Thorne said. I know harboring is a crime. Ilara, have you lost your mind? They're savages. She could have sickness. She could have relatives. They'll come for her. They'll burn you out." "She's a child," Ilara said, her voice shaking with a sudden cold fury. "She was freezing to death by my barn. What was I to do? Let her die?" "Yes," Corinne shrieked, pulling her arm away. "That's exactly what you do. It's not our business. It's the law. Thorne will have your ranch for this. He'll have my ranch if he thinks I knew and didn't tell." "So that's it," Ilara said bitterly. "You're not worried about me. You're worried about yourself. You're going to run straight to him." Corinne's face crumpled, and for a second Ilara saw the fear beneath the malice. "He's a hard man, Ilara. This ain't like back east. You can't just adopt strays. This is their land. They hate us. That child would watch you burn and not shed a tear. Get out, Corinne." "Ilara, please. Get out." Ilara pointed to the door. "Go tell your marshal. Go on. But you walk out into that storm, you're not welcome back. Not ever." Corinne hesitated, her gaze torn between the door and the fireplace. She was terrified of the storm, but she was more terrified of being implicated. With a strangled sob, she pulled her scarf back on. "You've made a terrible mistake, Ilara. You've doomed yourself." She yanked the door open and was swallowed by the screaming wind. Ilara slammed it shut and threw the bar, her entire body trembling. She leaned against the wood, her eyes closed. The silence returned, broken only by the fire and the ragged breathing from the shadows. The girl emerged slowly, her dark eyes fixed on Ilara. She had understood the anger, if not the words. "She's gone," Ilara said, her voice hollow. She's gone to get the marshal. She looked at the sick child, who was now her prisoner as much as her guest. We don't have much time. The girl's feverish eyes met hers. She held out the small, carved bird, offering it. "Tala," she whispered. "Is that your name?" Elara asked. The girl nodded. "Tala." She then pointed at herself, and then at the bird. It was her name, Tala. In her language, it meant wolf. But the bird... Elara didn't understand the bird. "Tala," Elara repeated. "My name is Elara." She knelt. "We have to hide you, Tala. There's a man coming. A bad man." Tala's eyes, already wide with fever, filled with a new, sharper terror. She clearly knew what a bad man was. She scrambled to her feet, clutching the blanket, and looked frantically around the small room. Elara grabbed her hand. "It's all right. I know a place. But we have to hurry." The storm was a monster outside. But the real monster, Elara knew, wore a badge and rode a pale horse, and he was coming. There was a root cellar, a dark, damp space under the kitchen floorboards, accessible by a heavy trapdoor hidden beneath the rag rug. Arthur had built it to store potatoes and apples through the winter. It was cold, and it smelled of earth and mold, but it was the only place. "In here," Elara said, pulling the heavy rug aside and lifting the iron ring. The trapdoor groaned in protest. Tala shrank back, her eyes wide with fear of the black, gaping hole. "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "No. Dark." "It's the only way, Tala," Elara insisted, her own voice sharp with panic. She could hear Corinne's hysteria in her mind, and she imagined the marshal riding hard, his face a mask of cold fury. "He will find you. Do you understand? The man in the coat. He will find you." She climbed down the short ladder first, lighting a kerosene lamp and placing it on a low shelf. The space was barely 5 feet high. "See? It's not so bad. I'll bring you blankets. I'll be right up here. You'll hear my footsteps." She tried to make her voice soothing, but she knew she sounded as scared as the girl felt. Tala, still shivering, looked from Elara to the open kitchen door, as if calculating her chances in the storm. She knew she had none. With a look of profound, weary resignation that should never be on a child, she nodded. She clutched her small carved bird and descended the ladder. Elara passed her the wool blanket, then another, thinner one. "I'll bring you some broth as soon as I can. Don't make a sound, no matter what you hear. Do you promise me, Tala?" Tala nodded again, her black eyes swallowing the lamplight. She huddled on a wooden crate, pulling the blankets around her, and vanished into the shadows. Elara's heart ached. She felt like she was burying the child alive. She climbed out, replaced the heavy door, and dragged the rug back over it. It was a near-perfect concealment. She quickly swept the floor, brushed the telltale dirt from her hands, and put the basin of dirty water outside, dumping it into the storm. She scattered the worn-out moccasin scraps, kicking them deep into the mud near the porch. She had just returned to the hearth, forcing herself to sit in Arthur's chair and pick up a piece of mending, when the sound came. It was different from Corinna's frantic banging. This was a measured, heavy, authoritative knock that vibrated through the very bones of the house. Knock, knock, knock. She waited a beat, forcing her breathing to slow. Then she walked to the door and opened it. Marshal Elias Thorne stood on her porch. He filled the doorway, his broad shoulders blocking what little light remained. He wore a long, oilskin duster, and his hat was pulled low, casting his face in shadow. Rain and dust dripped from the brim. He didn't wait for an invitation, but stepped inside, bringing the cold with him, and removed his hat. His hair was iron grey, cropped short. His eyes, the colour of a winter sky, were piercing and devoid of warmth. "Mum," he said. His voice was a low gravel. Marshal, Ilara replied, clutching her shawl. This is a surprise. I trust you're not out in this weather for pleasure. Pleasure is one thing I don't get much of in this valley, Mrs. Hayes, Thorne said. He didn't look at her. His gaze was in motion, a slow, methodical sweep of the room. He saw the roaring fire, the recently used coffee pot, the single cup on the table. I was just visiting your neighbour. Mrs. Masters. Corinne was just here, Ilara said, keeping her voice level. She seems agitated. Agitated, Thorne repeated, as if testing the word. She said you were agitated too, said you threw her out. That's not very neighbourly, Ilara. He rarely used her first name. It was a calculated intimacy, designed to unnerve. We had a disagreement, Ilara said stiffly. It was a private matter. Was it? Thorne took a step closer to the fire. He rubbed his gloved hands together. She seemed to think it was a public one, a matter of territorial law. He turned his full attention on her. It felt like a physical weight. She said you had a visitor, a small one, from the mesa. Ilara met his gaze. This was the moment. The lie had to be perfect. Corinne is a lonely woman, Marshal. You know that. She sees shadows where there are none. She was startled by the storm, and I was in no mood for her gossip. That's all. Thorne stared at her for a long, silent moment. Ilara could hear her own heart beating. She was sure he could hear it too. She was sure he could hear the ragged, feverish breathing of the child directly beneath his feet. Funny, Thorne said, his voice dangerously soft. She's seen shadows before, but she's never come running to my office in hysterics. She was specific. Said you had a sick girl. An Indian. And where is she? Ilara asked, gesturing around the small, empty room. As you can see, Marshal, I'm quite alone. I have been for 6 months. The mention of her widowhood hung in the air. It was a shield, and they both knew it. Thorne's gaze softened, but only fractionally. I know this has been hard on you, Mum. Arthur was a good man. But grief can make people foolish. It can make them soft. He took a step toward the bedroom door. You mind if I look around? Just to satisfy Mrs. Masters. And myself. Be my guest, Ilara said, her stomach twisting. He walked into the bedroom. She heard him open the small wardrobe, heard the scrape of her trunk being pulled across the floor. He was thorough. He emerged a moment later. No one in there. He walked back to the center of the room, standing directly on the trapdoor. Ilara held her breath. But Corinne mentioned moccasins, worn through, said she saw them right by the door. I told her. They were rags. I threw them out. The wind has them now. Thorne nodded slowly. He looked down at the rug beneath his feet. He nudged it with his boot. Arthur built this place solid, he said, tapping the floorboards. Most men would have just built on the dirt. He put in a floor. A good one. He was a good carpenter, Ilara whispered. Thorne continued to stare at the rug. He seemed to be listening. Ilara felt a wave of nausea. Below them, Tala was hopefully asleep, or at least silent. A single cough, a single whimper, would be a death sentence. There are elements in this territory, Mrs. Hayes, that don't respect the law, Thorne said, his voice philosophical, almost paternal. Not my law, not God's law. They take what they want. They prey on the weak. My job is to keep the border clear, between us and them. He gestured vaguely toward the mesa. And between us and the other kind. He reached into his duster and pulled out a rolled-up piece of paper, a wanted poster. He tacked it to her wall with a small nail from his pocket, a shockingly domestic gesture. Ilara looked at it. It was a crude drawing of 2 men, The Barlow brothers, the text read. Hank and Clem. Wanted for horse theft, robbery and murder. $200 reward. Those men were spotted near the canyons yesterday, Thorne said. They're the worst kind. White men gone savage. They'd kill you for that mule, Mum. Kill you for the food in your pantry. Thank you for the warning, Marshal. I'm telling you this, he said, turning back to her, his eyes cold again. Because the world out here is dangerous. And harboring a runaway from the Pueblo, that's inviting a different kind of danger. Their men are out looking. They come here, they find that girl. They won't be polite. They won't knock. They'll take her, and they'll take whatever else they want. You, your livestock. They'll burn this place to the ground as a warning. I understand, Elara said. I hope you do. He put his hat back on. I'm going to post a deputy down at the crossroads. If you see anything, the Barlows or anyone else, you fire your shotgun twice. We'll be here. He looked at her one last time, his gaze lingering on the hearth. You keep that fire burning. It's a cold night, and you're all alone. He opened the door and left. Elara bolted it behind him and leaned against it, her legs giving way. She slid to the floor, shaking. He hadn't believed her. Not entirely. He had been testing her, threatening her, warning her. And he had planted a seed. The Barlow brothers. He was connecting the missing girl to the outlaws, painting a picture of a world full of threats, with him as the only savior. She waited a full 5 minutes, listening to the wind before she dared to move the rug. She lifted the trapdoor. Tala? He's gone. The small face that looked up from the darkness was streaked with tears. She hadn't made a sound, but she had been terrified. Elara helped her up. The girl was shaking again, but this time it was from more than fever. It's all right, Elara soothed, wrapping the blanket around her and guiding her back to the stool. He's gone. You're safe. He is the bad man, Tala whispered, her voice trembling. Yes, Elara said, her heart hardening. He is. Tala clutched her carved bird. He is looking for me. Why? Elara asked, ladling some broth from a pot on the stove. Tala, why did you run? Did someone hurt you? Tala looked into the fire. Not hurt. Sick. Everyone is sick. Her eyes were filled with a terrible adult knowledge. My brother, he is gone. She made a motion of flying away, like a bird. Elara's breath caught. Sickness? What kind of sickness? Tala shook her head, not knowing the word. The throat. It closes. They cannot breathe. Diphtheria. Elara had seen it once in a settlement back east, the strangling angel. It moved through families, killing children in days. My father, Tala continued, her voice gaining a desperate urgency. He is Kalen. He is the leader. He told me to run, to find the... She struggled for the word. The man who cuts, the medicine man. A doctor? Elara asked. Yes, doctor. Tala pointed west toward the town. He said, follow the creek, find the town, bring the doctor. But the storm, I got lost. And the men. What men? Elara asked, her blood chilling again. Not the marshal, other men. 2. They saw me. They chased me. I hid in the rocks. Then I saw your house. The smoke. The Barlow brothers. It all clicked into place, a horrifying, complex puzzle. Tala wasn't just a lost girl. She was on a desperate mission to save her people. But she wasn't just being hunted by the law. She was being actively hunted by 2 known murderers, and they had chased her here, to Elara's ranch. Elara looked at the shotgun on the wall. Marshal Thorne had warned her about the Barlows, but he was just as dangerous, and Corinne Masters had told the whole valley she was harboring an Indian. She was trapped between the law, the outlaws, and an epidemic. "All right, Tala," Ilara said, her voice grim. "You need to rest. You need to get your strength, because tomorrow, we're going to ride." "Ride?" "To Red Rock Creek," Ilara said, her decision made. "We're going to get your doctor." Dawn broke cold and sharp, the wind finally having exhausted itself. The valley was scrubbed clean, the air thin and brittle. The sky was a pale, merciless blue. Ilara had not slept. She had spent the night watching Tala drift in and out of a restless, feverish sleep by the fire, her own mind racing through impossible scenarios. Tala's fever was worse. Her skin was hot to the touch, and her breathing had a slight, wheezing quality that terrified Ilara. Diphtheria. If Tala had it, Ilara was already exposed. But more than that, if the girl was this sick, she would never make the ride to town. Ilara was facing a new, terrible choice. She couldn't take Tala, and she couldn't leave her. If she rode for the doctor, she would have to leave Tala alone, hidden, and pray. Pray the Barlows weren't watching. Pray Marshal Thorne didn't decide to return. "Tala," she said, kneeling by the stool as the girl's eyes fluttered open. "Listen to me. You are too sick to ride. I have to go alone. I will get the doctor, Dr. Marcus Cole. I will bring him here." Tala grabbed her wrist, her small hand surprisingly strong. "No, go, you, go, they will come. The two men. I have to, Tala. He has medicine, for you, for your people." "No," Tala insisted, coughing, a dry, barking sound that tore at Ilara's nerves. "Kalen, my father. He said they will follow." "Who? The Barlows?" Tala nodded. "They watch. They wait." She was right. The Barlows weren't just random threats. They had chased her. They knew she was valuable. They wouldn't have just given up. They would be watching the ranch, waiting for an opportunity. If Ilara left, they would see her. They would wait until she was gone. And then, she couldn't leave. But she couldn't stay. Every hour the fever climbed, Tala was closer to death, and her people on the mesa were dying without help. "There's only one way," Ilara said, standing. "Samson. My mule." Samson was old, stubborn, and slow. But he was reliable. The ride to Red Rock Creek, which would take an hour on a fast horse, would take 2 on Samson. It was too long. She looked at her empty barn. Arthur's horse, a strong bay gelding, had been sold to Patterson at the general store to pay for Arthur's casket and burial. "No," Ilara said to herself. "I won't be beaten." She went to the root cellar and returned with a rope. "Taylor, I need you to go back to the cellar. You have to. I'm going to get the doctor. But I have to do it in a way they don't expect." She bundled the still protesting Tala back into the cellar, this time with a full canteen of water and a small plate of dry bread. "I will be back before midday, Tala. I swear it. Do not open this door. Not for anyone." She barred the kitchen door from the inside and climbed out the small, stiff-hinged window at the back of her bedroom, dropping lightly to the ground. She didn't go to the barn. She didn't saddle the mule. Instead, she kept low, using the creek bed and the low ridges as cover, and she began to walk. It was a grueling 3-mile hike, over sharp rocks and through thorny scrub. She was not a small woman, but she moved with the desperate agility of a predator. She kept her eyes on the high ridges, scanning for any sign of a watcher. She saw nothing, but that, she knew, was worse. It meant they were good at their job. She arrived at the edge of Red Rock Creek nearly 2 hours later, her boots covered in mud and her face scratched from the mesquite. The town was just waking up. A blacksmith was hammering at his anvil, the sound echoing in the cold air. She saw the marshal's deputy, a young, pimply man named Roster, sitting on a chair outside the jail, tilted back, fast asleep. So much for the crossroads. Her destination was the small adobe building with the fading Dr. M. Cole sign. Dr. Marcus Cole was a man in his late 50s, perpetually tired, with a kind face and hands stained with laudanum and silver nitrate. He was a pragmatist, overworked and underpaid, but he was the only doctor within 50 miles. She banged on his door. He opened it, rubbing his eyes, a cup of coffee in his hand. "Elara, Mrs. Hayes, what's wrong? You look like you've been dragged." "Marcus, I need you," Elara said, pushing past him into his small, cluttered office. It smelled of carbolic acid and old books. "I need you to come to the ranch. Now. What is it? Is it you? Did one of those fences snap back on you?" "It's a child, a girl. She's from the Pueblo, and she's sick. I think it's diphtheria." Dr. Cole's face, which had been soft with concern, hardened instantly. He set his coffee cup down. "Elara, you know I can't. That's Marshall's business. That's their business." "She's dying, Marcus. She's a 7-year-old girl. Her name is Tala. She came for help. Her whole village is sick. Her brother is dead." "And if I go, what happens?" he argued, throwing his hands up. "Thorne finds out, he'll run me out of the territory. And what good will I be to anyone then? Besides, if it's diphtheria, I can't. It's too contagious. I'll bring it back here. I'll infect the whole town." "And if you don't," Elara shot back, her voice low and dangerous, "her entire people might die. Is that what you want? A genocide on your conscience because you were afraid of Elias Thorne? Arthur respected you. He said you were the only decent man in this town." The mention of her husband struck home. Dr. Cole sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. "Elara, you are asking me to risk everything." "I am risking everything just by being here," she said. "There's more. The Barlow brothers. They're after her. They chased her to my ranch." That changed the calculus. This wasn't just about the law or disease. It was about outlaws. "The Barlows? Are you sure?" "Tala saw them. They're watching my land. Marcus, please. She's just a child." He looked at his black bag, then back at Elara. He was beaten. "Lord help us both. All right? I'll get my things. I have some of the new antitoxin. It came in on the last stage. It's a long shot, but it's something. Get my horse. I'll be right out." "No horse," Elara said. "And not your buggy. They're watching the ranch. They'll see us coming. We have to go back the way I came, on foot, through the creek bed." Dr. Cole looked at his worn leather boots. "On foot? Elara, I'm not a young man." "You're the only man," she said. He sighed again, a sound of pure defeat. 5 minutes. He packed his bag with vials, bandages, and a small metal case of instruments. Elara bought a few supplies from a sleepy Mr. Patterson, more kerosene, some salted pork, and a bag of coffee, making a show of a normal supply run. She even waved to the still-sleeping Deputy Roscoe. She met Dr. Cole behind the livery. They slipped out of town unnoticed and began the long, cold trek back to the ranch. They had been walking for over an hour, scrambling up a steep, rocky embankment, when Dr. Cole stopped, breathing hard. I need a minute, Elara." "We can't," she urged. "We have to keep moving." "Just 1 minute." It was 1 minute too long. Well. "Look-a here, Hank." The voice came from above them. Elara and Dr. Cole froze. On the ridge, silhouetted against the bright morning sky, were 2 men. They were rough, bearded, and filthy, and they both held Winchester rifles, aimed loosely in their direction. They were the men from the poster, Hank and Clem Barlow. "That's the widow from the ranch," said the taller one, Hank. He had a mean, narrow face and tobacco-stained teeth. "And look, she went and got the town doctor. How thoughtful." "We saw you leave, ma'am," said the other, Clem, who was stockier and looked dull-witted. "We was wondering what you was up to, sneaking out your own window. Very suspicious." "What do you want?" Elara said, her hand instinctively going to the small skinning knife she kept on her belt. "Don't be hasty, ma'am," Hank said, laughing, a dry, ugly sound. "We ain't here for you. We're here for what you're hiding." "I'm not hiding anything," Elara said. "Don't lie to us, lady," Hank snapped, his good humor vanishing. "We tracked that little skin girl for 2 days. She's the daughter of their chief, or whatever he calls himself. Kalen. Worth a hell of a lot to him. We figure we'll trade her back. For gold, for rifles, for whatever we want." "And you," he said, leveling his rifle at Dr. Cole, "you're going to make sure she's healthy when we make the trade. We can't sell damaged goods." "She's sick," Dr. Cole said, finding his voice. "Very sick. You go near her, you'll catch it. It's the diphtheria." Clem Barlow took an involuntary step back. "Diphtheria? Hank, I don't like this." "Shut up, Clem," Hank spat. "He's lying, trying to scare us. Now, you two are gonna walk, nice and slow, back to the ranch, and you're gonna give us the girl." "No," Elara said. Hank's eyes narrowed. "What did you say?" "I said no." He raised the rifle to his shoulder, sighting directly on her. "I ain't asking, ma'am. I'm telling. You or the girl. Your choice." Dr. Cole stepped slightly in front of Elara. "Listen to me, son. I'm a doctor. I've got my bag. I've got laudanum. I've got money. You can take my watch. But this is a fool's errand. The girl is dying. You'll get nothing for her, and you'll get yourselves killed by her people." "He talks a lot, Hank," Clem whined. "He does," Hank agreed. "And I'm tired of listening." He cocked the hammer. The click was deafening in the silence. Elara looked at the dark bore of the rifle, and she knew, with a terrifying certainty, that he was going to shoot. "Now wait!" Dr. Cole shouted, holding up his hands. "Let's be reasonable. There's no need for—" Elara didn't wait. She grabbed the doctor's heavy black bag with one hand and shoved him with the other. "Run!" she screamed. She heaved the bag at Clem's head. He yelped and ducked, the bag striking his shoulder. The rifle discharged. The shot went wide, the bullet whining off a rock near Elara's feet, stinging her cheek with stone fragments. "Get her!" Hank roared. Elara didn't look back. She scrambled down the embankment, sliding on the loose scree, dragging Dr. Cole with her. He was clumsy and gasping, but adrenaline gave him speed. "This way!" she yelled, pulling him into the thicket of salt cedar and willow that lined the creek bed. Another shot rang out, and leaves exploded just above her head. The Barlows were coming after them, cursing and crashing through the brush. "I can't, Elara, I can't," Marcus panted, collapsing against a tree. "You have to," she hissed, yanking him up. "He will kill us. He will kill us, and he will go to the ranch, and he will kill that child. Move!" The terror of that thought drove her forward. They were on her land now. She knew every twist of this creek, every game trail, every washout. The Barlows knew how to track, but she knew her home. "Through here," she said, pulling him through a narrow deer trail that was almost invisible. It was a shortcut, bypassing a long bend in the creek. It was steep and thorny, but it cut a 1/4 mile off the distance. They burst out of the thicket into the open pasture 50 yards from her house. It was a terrible, exposed run. "They're coming!" Clem's voice bellowed from the woods, closer than she'd hoped. "Go! Get in the house! Bar the door!" Ilara shouted at Marcus. He stumbled across the yard, falling once, and scrambled onto the porch. Ilara, however, ran to the barn. She fumbled with the latch, tore the door open, and ran inside, grabbing the pitchfork. She ran back out, just as Hank and Clem emerged from the trees. Hank raised his rifle, but Ilara didn't hesitate. She threw the pitchfork like a spear. It was a desperate, wild throw, but it served its purpose. It landed 10 feet in front of them, tines first in the hard-packed earth, a sudden, menacing obstacle. Hank stopped, startled by the sheer ferocity of the attack. That 1 second hesitation was all Ilara needed. She sprinted to the house, slammed the heavy door, and threw the bar just as Hank's boot crashed against it. A bullet tore through the wood, splintering it, passing harmlessly through the kitchen and lodging in the far wall. "You're dead, widow!" Hank screamed from outside. "You hear me? You're dead! And that doctor, too!" "Ilara!" Dr. Cole was pressed against the wall, pale and shaking, his bag clutched to his chest. My God! My God!" "The window!" Ilara gasped, ignoring him. She ran to the kitchen window and peered out. The Barlows had taken cover behind the water trough. "Give us the girl and we'll let you and the doc live," Hank yelled. "Go to hell!" Ilara shouted back. She grabbed the shotgun from its pegs. "Ilara, don't," Marcus pleaded. "You'll just make them angrier." "They're already going to kill us," Ilara said, her voice a low, cold calm. She checked the shells. Arthur had kept it loaded. "They want the girl. They know she's here. We can't run. We can't hide. The only way out is through." Another shot shattered the kitchen window, showering the room in glass. Ilara ducked, then moved to the bedroom. She punched out the remaining shards of the small window there and leveled the shotgun. She saw Clem's hat poke up from behind the trough. She fired. The blast was deafening in the small house. The buckshot ripped through the air, and Clem screamed, not in pain, but in terror, diving backward. "She's got a scattergun, Hank." "I know she's got a scattergun, you idiot," Hank roared. "Get around the back. See if there's another way in." Ilara ran back to the kitchen. "Marcus, the cellar. Now." She dragged the rug aside and lifted the door. "Tala, stay back!" Tala was huddled on the steps, her eyes wide with terror. "The bad men. They're here," Ilara said. "Get to the back, under the shelf, and cover your ears." She turned to Marcus. "Doctor, your bag. Get down there. You have to help her. That's the priority." "What about you?" he asked, his voice shaking. "I'm going to hold them off." "You can't. Ilara, there are 2 of them. They'll burn the house." "They won't burn the house," Ilara said, a grim realization dawning. "Not as long as they think the girl is in it. They want her alive." She pushed him toward the ladder. "Go. Keep her quiet. And keep her alive." Marcus Cole, his face ashen, looked at the determined woman and then at the sick child. His oath, which had wavered in the safety of his office, reasserted itself in the face of true violence. He nodded. "All right, but Ilara, don't die." He descended into the cellar. Ilara handed him the lamp. "Bar the door from the inside," she said, pointing to a heavy wooden brace Arthur had built for that exact purpose. "Don't open it. Not even for me. Not unless I give the word." "What's the word?" Ilara thought for a second. "Arthur. The word is Arthur." He nodded, and she closed the trap door. She heard the scrape of the heavy brace being lowered into place. She was alone. She dragged the heavy kitchen table over the trap door, upending it, creating a solid, heavy barrier. Now she had 2 fronts to defend, the front door and the back window. "Widow!" Hank's voice called out again. "We're getting impatient. Last chance. Send out the girl." Ilara crept to the shattered kitchen window, shotgun ready. She could see Hank still behind the trough. But where was Clem? The silence stretched. It was a hunter's silence. He was flanking her. She heard a scrape, not at the back window, at the barn. He wasn't trying to get in, not yet. He was after her mule. No, he was after something else. Fire. Dr. Cole had been right. She smelled the acrid scent of kerosene, and then smoke. "The barn!" Clem yelled, his voice triumphant. "I got the barn, Hank. Let's see how she likes a fire." Ilara's heart seized. The barn! Samson was in there. Her chickens, her tools, everything she had left. But it wasn't just that. The barn was tinder dry. The wind, though calmer, was still blowing toward the house. They weren't just trying to flush her out. They were going to burn her alive. They had decided the girl wasn't worth the trouble. "Ilara!" Dr. Cole's muffled voice came from under the floor. "I smell smoke! Is it the house?" "The barn!" she yelled back. "They're trying to burn us out." She ran to the door, shotgun in hand. She had to save Samson. She had to stop the fire before it spread. She readied herself to lift the bar. And then she heard another sound. Hoofbeats. Not 2 horses. Many. And a carriage. "What in the—" Hank's voice, confused. Ilara ran to the window. Coming down the small track to her ranch, at a full, reckless gallop, was a wagon. And riding alongside it, on his pale horse, was Marshal Elias Thorne. Marshal Thorne arrived, confronting the Barlows amid the gunfire and the burning barn. The outlaws immediately lied, claiming Ilara had kidnapped Dr. Cole and was allied with the Pueblo. This lie fit Thorne's prejudice, and he prepared to storm the house. Before he could, Hank Barlow betrayed the truce, shooting a deputy and igniting a 3-way firefight. Ilara, trapped, chose a side and blasted Hank with her shotgun. Enraged, Clem charged the house, broke down the door, and fired wildly, a bullet tearing through the floor and wounding Dr. Cole below. As Clem raised his rifle to kill Ilara, Marshal Thorne shot him dead. Thorne entered the ruins and ordered the cellar open. He found the wounded doctor, who confirmed Tala was dying. As Thorne stared in disbelief at the sick child, he heard a new sound, the low, steady beat of drums echoing across the valley. The sound grew into a pulsing rhythm. The drums! Ilara looked out from the broken door to see the ridges lined with silent figures from San Geronimo. Their leader, Kalen, rode down alone, his face a mask of severe dignity. "Where is my daughter?" he demanded. Thorne, suddenly powerless, admitted she was sick in the cellar. Kalen brushed past him and found Tala with Dr. Cole. The doctor, holding the antitoxin, explained the epidemic. Kalen, seeing Ilara was also ill, ordered the medicine for his daughter, then for her. As Tala was treated, Kalen's men moved in. They seized the wounded Hank Barlow and his brother's body, ignoring Thorne's furious protests. "Your law is weak," Kalen stated, his authority absolute. "They hunted our children. They will be judged by our law." His men moved to save the barn as Kalen gently lifted his daughter. He looked at Ilara and Dr. Cole. "You will come with us. We will care for you." As Ilara rode toward the mesa, weak but safe, the drums thundered again. It was not a warning. It was the sound of a people's heart, a valley echoing its thanks. She was no longer alone. Ilara Hayes's choice that day was a single stone dropped into a silent canyon. But the echo changed everything. She went to the Pueblo not as a prisoner, but as a patient and an honored guest. She and Dr. Cole, with his medicine and her courage, helped Kalen's people fight back the strangling angel. And in healing them, they healed a rift that had divided the valley for a generation. The drums that night were a thank you, but they were also a promise that courage is more powerful than law, and compassion speaks a language that everyone understands. The story of the widow who faced down outlaws and the law to save one small girl became a legend in the Red Rock Valley, a reminder that a single act of bravery can make the drums of an entire nation echo in your honor. If this story moved you, please honor that echo. Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear a story of courage, and please subscribe to our channel. We believe these stories matter, and your support allows us to keep telling them. Thank you for listening.